If you filled up a car in the early 1970s, it cost you less than 40 cents a gallon. Today, filling up that same tank usually costs $50 or more. You've probably noticed this with groceries, housing, and coffee. A dollar simply buys a fraction of what it used to. We tend to view this steady erosion as a natural force, much like the weather. In reality, the shrinking power of your dollar is a manufactured outcome with a very specific purpose. It is driven by a massive, repeating economic pattern known as the long-term debt cycle. While we easily notice the short-term recessions that hit every 5 to 10 years, this much larger cycle slowly builds in the background across an entire human lifespan, spanning 50 to 100 years. Viewing the economy on a century-long timeline reveals that the shrinking value of your cash serves a vital function. The system uses this process to manage enormous amounts of national debt. This chart shows the long-term upward trajectory of a nation's borrowing. Think of a country's economy like a giant multi-generational credit card. Over decades, governments continually borrow money to fund wars, build infrastructure, and pay for social programs. We go through short-term economic booms where credit is cheap, followed by temporary busts. But in every single boom, slightly more debt is added than in the previous cycle. Notice how the valleys on this chart never drop back down to zero. The baseline amount of debt keeps growing, compounding so slowly that people barely notice it happening. Eventually, after 50 to 100 years, the math catches up. The total debt pile becomes so massive that economic growth stalls out. The government finds itself struggling to bring in enough tax revenue just to pay the interest on what it already owes. When the bill finally comes due at the peak of this cycle, the old tricks stop working. The government is backed into a corner and forced to make a drastic choice about who is going to pay for all that accumulated borrowing. Put yourself in the shoes of a national leader facing this debt climax. The math says the obligations are unpayable. You must pick one of 3 doors to try and fix the problem. Door number 1 is deflation. This means admitting you spent too much, severely slashing government programs, and ruthlessly balancing the budget to pay off exactly what you owe with hard-earned revenue. The economic pain behind this door is brutal. When a government abruptly pulls money out of the economy to pay down debt, businesses fail, wages plunge, and massive numbers of people lose their jobs. The Great Depression was a forced deflation, and it caused widespread societal breakdown. Door number 2 is default. This is a complete refusal to pay. The government simply looks at its lenders, both domestic and foreign, and tells them they will not be getting their money back. The immediate fallout here is international isolation. The nation's credibility is instantly destroyed. Foreign investors pull their money out of the country in a panic, and the government is locked out of global credit markets, unable to ever borrow money again. Because forced deflation creates agonizing domestic unemployment, and explicit default ruins the nation's standing on the world stage, both of these options are political suicide. Leaders are forced to seek a hidden third option. Door number 3 is currency debasement. Instead of making painful cuts or refusing to pay, the government's central bank simply creates new money, expanding the supply of currency much faster than the actual economy is growing. Look at these side-by-side charts to see how this trick works. On the left, we have a fixed debt. Let's say it's $1 million, measured against the current money supply. If you flood the system with a massive wave of new currency, the actual number you owe stays exactly the same, but it now looks tiny compared to the total money floating around. The debt becomes mathematically easier to pay off. But there is a hidden trade-off to this new math. Because more money is now chasing the same amount of real-world goods, prices rise. As the government's debt burden shrinks, every existing dollar bill loses a piece of its purchasing power. Leaders repeatedly choose this path because the pain is silent and widely distributed. It avoids the visible panic of mass unemployment or a formal default, and it allows the government to keep funding its programs. Debasement acts as the ultimate release valve for a century of accumulated debt. The debt gets paid off, but with money that is worth significantly less. It is a quiet wealth transfer from the citizens who hold the currency to the government that borrowed it. This pattern has played out over centuries. To pay for sprawling military campaigns and urban infrastructure, Ancient Roman emperors secretly melted down their silver coins, mixing in cheaper metals so they could produce more coins from the same amount of silver. The currency eventually lost credibility completely. In the modern era, the British pound sterling was the undisputed global reserve currency. But after accumulating massive debts incurred across 2 world wars, Britain could not pay the bill through taxation alone. Instead of defaulting, they heavily devalued the pound to survive the crushing financial weight. The current global reserve currency, the US dollar, is following this exact playbook. Decades of deficit spending on wars and social programs have built a historic debt pile, and the dollar has steadily lost purchasing power as the money supply expands to accommodate it. No paper currency is immune to this process. As long as the long-term debt cycle exists, history shows that governments facing an unpayable bill will eventually prioritize saving the system by debasing the money. This economic reality creates very distinct winners and losers. If you are a saver who keeps your cash sitting statically in a bank account, debasement silently steals your wealth. The purchasing power of those savings is slowly melting away, even if the number on your bank statement goes up. In contrast, people with large fixed-rate debts actually benefit. If you took out a massive loan before the money supply expanded, your wages might rise with inflation, making your fixed monthly payment much easier to handle. The debt gets cheaper to pay off over time. The ultimate defense mechanism during this phase of the cycle is buying tangible assets. Historically, things like land, real estate, and shares in profitable businesses tend to rise in price alongside the expanding money supply, absorbing the inflation rather than being destroyed by it. Because paper money is mathematically designed to lose its value at the end of a long-term debt cycle, true financial security comes from owning enduring assets rather than holding onto cash that is slowly fading away.